This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 361.
If people want to know how you actually build a culture, it is through this. It's
through stories.
It's telling the story of the union traffic controller in Hobart that now is the general manager of Tasmania, and his story, his journey, how he's come through the business. The story of the traffic controller that runs into a burning building and pulls a lady out on his way home from work. I mean, these are the stories that you tell of the amazing things that people do inside of the business that make you sit back and go, you know what? This is pretty cool.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 361. And our guest today is Ben Marsonet, CEO of Altus Group. On the 6 stages of executive evolution, leading with visibility and how powerful stories shape culture.
I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inner Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive.
In this episode, I chat to Ben Marsonet. With over 15 years of experience in the traffic management industry, Ben has held various operational, commercial and senior roles at Altus Group, the largest and leading provider of traffic management services in Australia and New Zealand. Starting on the front line as a traffic controller, Ben has worked his way all the way up through executive roles and was appointed the CEO of the group in July 2021. Since his appointment, he has led the business through a successful private equity investment, as well as doubling revenue and earnings of the business through a mix of organic and acquisition activity. Ben has an immense passion for safety and growth of people and about leading a business that has a genuine impact on its employees and the communities it operates in. He is a genuine guy. I had a long dinner with Ben and a couple of other CEOs, and I can tell you, he is exactly as you hope he would be. A true chief. In today's CEO Masterclass, Ben will share how curiosity and saying yes to challenges will accelerate your career growth. Integrating new teams during M&A while protecting a cohesive company culture and momentum, why spending time on the front line strengthens employee connection authentically, and how vulnerability and sharing real stories builds trust, unity, in a thriving workplace. Chiefs, without further ado, let's hear from the remarkable Ben Marsonet. Righto, Chiefs, we're here with the one and only Ben Marsonet, CEO of Altus Group. Ben, welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast.
Thank you, Greg. My great pleasure to be here with you.
Ben, we have a great tradition on the Inner Chief. We'd love to know where our CEOs have come from. Can you tell a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
Yeah, I think when we think to a story, probably there's a few that maybe not fit for the podcast, so I might just give you a bit of a summary of where I came from. I grew up in Seven Hills, which is near Blacktown in Western Sydney. I'd say it was a pretty standard sort of suburban upbringing to very hard-working parents. My father's a civil engineer, my mother's an accountant. And, I think those two in particular put a lot of strong values into me as a young man. My old man was a very hard worker, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day with an hour and a half commute. And my mother was one of the most kind and caring people you'll ever meet. There was always people sort of in and out of a house. And it was a pretty standard suburban upbringing is how I would describe it in the beautiful western suburbs of Sydney.
Oh, magic. Hey, what was your first ever job?
My first ever job, I worked at McDonald's and I absolutely hated it and was no good at it. and I didn't last very long at all.
Yeah, funny. My first job was in fast food. I lasted about 8 weeks packing chickens. Frozen chicken at a chicken shop. Oh.
I think you might have outlasted me. I didn't last very long. I didn't particularly enjoy it.
Okay, mate. Most important question of your early days. First ever car.
It was a canary yellow 1986 Toyota Camry. Yeah, no, it was a real chick magnet, Greg, I've got to say. And like my first job, it didn't last very long. It didn't take long for me to break it and write it off. So, but that was my first car, canary yellow Camry. Manual, fantastic. Speedo wouldn't go over 60, so you never really knew how fast you were going. It was great piece of motoring, yeah.
Oh, the good old days, eh? Yeah, it was great. Mate, let's get on to the real business, your career journey. It's been quite a interesting and remarkable kind of journey where you actually, we'll talk about why how you came from being on this front line as a traffic controller all the way now to being CEO of this rapidly growing private equity backed largest traffic controller in the country. We did all that without university education, which I absolutely love and have always felt like perhaps that's not at all a prerequisite for any sort of success. So you're backing me up there. As we go through this journey, or you reflect back on it, I'm not talking about leadership now, but just about your own personal growth. Were there any mottos or principles, I wonder if that came from your mum or your dad, or anywhere really that helped you just keep going and advancing?
Yeah, I think as I reflect back, and I've only really started to do this probably in the last year or two, you sort of sit there and go, how on earth did a traffic controller from Blacktown end up here sitting in this chair? But I think the one that always sticks out to me is that I've always been a default yes person. I think as things and opportunities have been presented to me along the way, I've always defaulted to saying yes, sometimes to my detriment, and you take on too much and you burn yourself out a little bit. But I think that was a big part that allowed me to take on new challenges and keep learning and move through a couple of different organisations to get myself to where I am now. I think the other two very much come from my parents, this value of hard work. It's on a sign behind me here. We call it GSD. You've got to have a bit of get shit done about you as you start to move your way through, and you do, and you are taking on challenges. And I think the other bit is really around kindness and understanding and creating genuine connections with people. I think those three things have allowed me to take advantage of opportunities that were being given to me that I never at the time would have dreamt of where they would lead to or where I would end up.
Yeah, three powerful principles. If we talk about now more about professional development and the metamorphosis that's got to go on there, I mean, we talk about this in called a career journey map where you go up through different levels, and every level in many ways you've got to reinvent your routine, your network, your asset skills, your track record's got to be built every single time. From frontline to CEO is like 6 or 7 levels, right? I wonder if you can break your sort of professional growth or personal metamorphosis into chapters. Like, is it, if you look back now and reflect on it, is there some clear leaps that you made? Oh, I was a yellow belt, now I'm a green belt. I don't know if that makes sense, but can you reflect on that?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there was 6 real periods of the journey to get me to where I am. I think those initial couple of years where I was working as a traffic controller out there on the front line, you're learning how to interact. I was sort of leading teams from the time I was about 20 years old, so you're starting to learn how to lead and influence, colleagues around you that are far more experienced and have been doing this for a lot longer than I ever had. And I think one of the constants across my career is that I've had people around me that have seen potential in me that perhaps I didn't see in myself. From the day that I applied to get a job in traffic control, I've not applied for a job since, and I've not asked for a promotion since. There have been people around me that have seen me and sort of lifted me up. And I think, the first one of those is a guy named Tony Maguire, who now 20 years later is an employee of mine and I lead him. But he sort of took me off the road and brought me into an office environment and put me into a job in scheduling and dispatch. And I think when I was in that role, I learned a lot about how to influence and manage a blue-collar workforce. You learn how to get the best out of these people and listen to them. And I think I learned this sort of critical part there that these guys and girls just want to be heard. They just want to be listened to. They want their opinion to matter. So in that sort of initial part, when I was working in those very frontline sort of operational roles, I learned a lot about interacting with a large sort of blue-collar workforce. I mean, I was looking after, I don't know, it was probably 100 people or something at the time, but I learned a lot through that period. And then as I moved from that business and into Altus, it was another guy, Steve, who was the CEO at the time. I originally came in to run their little Sydney operation, which wasn't going terribly well. And after about 6 weeks, there was a bit of a regime change that the CEO put in, and I'll never forget it. He sat me down in this crappy office we had in Castle Hill. It was a bit of a halfway house. And he sat me down and he said, Ben, I want you to be the state manager of New South Wales. And I was, 25 at the time or something. And he said to me, have you ever seen a P&L before? And I thought it was like a trick question. I thought he was speaking Spanish to me or something, And I said no. And he sat me down and he said, right, well, here's this spreadsheet. And this is the time when I thought spreadsheets were just for making lists. And he said, here, this is revenue, this is direct costs, this is your gross profit, your overhead, and this is this thing called EBITDA. And if you told me at that point in time, I would use the acronym EBITDA as much as I have over the preceding 15 years, I never would have believed you. And he just said to me, you want to get more of this stuff at the top, spend less of this in the middle, and you'll get more of this down the bottom, And that was sort of my introduction into financial management. I went through a period there. When I took over that business, it was turning over about $16 million, right? It was a decent sized organization and had a couple of hundred people. And under my exceptional leadership, it went from 16 million of revenue to 8 million in 6 months and was hemorrhaging money left, right and center. But we got the right group of people together with us there. And, with a bit of guidance from Steve and the CFO at the time, I started to learn the key sort of fundamentals of how to get this thing to work. And we grew that business from 8 million to 50 million in 3 years, fully organically. Capital deployment. So I had this kind of period. So I've learned sort of how to deal with blue collar workforce. So then I have this period where I start to learn commercials and strong organic growth and how you can drive a bit of value. And then you sort of move into the next phase, which was a guy named Jeff Doyle, who had taken over as the CEO, and he elevated me into an executive position where I wasn't just now looking after New South Wales, I was looking after all of our business units all across the country. And I think Jeff was, he was ex-CEO of Adecco, right? So running big workforces. And I learned a lot in that time about how to communicate more with a white collar and a management team sort of workforce, how to communicate a strategy to people, how to get people excited about growth and moving forward and charging ahead. So through that period, you're starting to build a bit of a toolbox here centered around frontline engagement, sort of commercial management, and then the engagement and the management of a sort of white collar workforce or a management team, So through those couple of chapters, I really started to get it together. And then in 2021, in my mid 30s, the owner of the business came to me and, Jeff had sort of finished his run. He wanted to move on and do something else. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Ben, I'd like you to be the CEO of the thing. And you just kind of go, well, okay, here's another job that I'm probably not qualified for. I'll default to yes and have a
yes, default to yes. Yeah.
That's it. But working with David, I then had this period where I was able to learn a lot about how to, I think with Dave, he taught me how to think like a CEO. I didn't really know what a CEO was or what you really had to do, but he started to really help me think about how you could go about setting a culture inside of a business. He set up a structure around values and a lot of stuff around strategy and how to think through. I had sort of this rough vision of what I thought we could do with the thing, but he really helped me narrow that down and think it through strategically and get it down to sort of 5 very consumable sort of initiatives for the business, So I learned a lot in that first sort of, particularly 6 months as being a CEO when I didn't really know what I was doing. And then as you sort of move into the role that I've been doing for 3 or 4 years now, the sort of final chapter would be the SWAT team of people that I've tried to get around me. I think when you're coming up through it, there's always something to sort of follow. There's someone setting a strategy, something you're trying to execute. When that all sort of rests on your shoulders. This was the realization that I had very early on. I was like, oh, hang on, I've got to kind of come up with all of this. And I tried to get a bit of a SWAT team around me. So I've got a really good strategy advisor that I work with. I've got a very strong executive team that I use for different perspectives. I've got some very, very experienced private equity investors around me as well that'll give me perspective. And then beyond that, I've got a group of sort of other CEOs that I interact with to sort of bounce ideas off and get perspectives. And they're from all sorts of backgrounds, big tech CEO, someone in healthcare and education resources. And these types of people help you to continue to think through and challenge the way in which you go about it. But I think all the way along, I've always been a very sort of practical learner. I'm not a guy who goes and sits in a lecture theatre and gets an awful lot out of it. I think that sort of hands-on people that you can learn off, different perspectives that you can grab from wherever it is that they're coming, whether you agree with it or not, it's all valid in the sort of decision making and the growth process. So I think if you had to kind of break it down, that's sort of the different stages that I've been through and how I've been able to kind of continue to grow and expand my perspectives and horizons,
That's a brilliant breakdown. Thank you for that. It would have taken me a bit of time to work all that out. It's something that you actually said right at the very beginning. It was in chapter 1 and chapter 2, I think. And you mentioned, right, people just want to be heard. They want to be validated. You and I have this, we'll talk about this later, we have a passion for men's health in particular, but I'll never forget the first men's camp I ran. I don't know, it must be nearly 10 years ago now. But we had this campfire one night, and we all sat around, and everyone gets in a space of absolute confidentiality. You get to tell a story, and then write something on a piece of paper and burn it in this campfire, and have a chug of whiskey and sit down again. And what was quite remarkable was I knew this would be a good experience, but. We had about 15 guys and went for over 3 hours. And when I couldn't go to sleep that night. I sat there at like 2 a.m. going, far out, what have I just witnessed? And it was this realization that everyone has a story and they're just dying to tell it to someone who will listen and tell them it's okay. It's a good story. And that was the moment, because I sort of half knew a lot of those guys, right? I didn't know any of those stories I was telling. I didn't know any of it. And I thought, what have they been carrying?
Yeah.
They're carrying here, like.
Absolutely. And it's incredibly true in business as well. I mean, we're a big organization these days. We've got 5,500 people across Australia and New Zealand, right? And one of the things that, as I say, I learned very, very early on is that every person is unique, right? And everyone has their own story, their own perspective, their own whatever it is. And people are just dying to be heard, whether they want to give you advice on how to run your business better. And I can tell you the traffic controllers can be quite frank with some of their advice around some of the decisions that one may make. But, I think that ability to be able to sit and genuinely and authentically listen to people without judgment and just acknowledge that we are all unique. It's really about being humane in all of it and have that level of authenticity. That there is how you sort of start to build a culture in a business or in a community or whatever it is. It starts with listening and being out there amongst it.
Chief, one of the biggest challenges in all leadership roles is how to influence stakeholders. The difficult, the easy, the elusive, all sorts of stakeholders, board members, executive teams, clients, suppliers, the media, the community. And if you want the definitive guide on how to think about it, how to set yourself up and prepare for it, how to run through and map your stakeholders, and how to finally influence with integrity, go to chiefmaker.com/stakeholder for a fully editable PDF guide on mastering stakeholder influence. That's chiefmaker.com/stakeholder.
One of the second themes that comes through in all that is this undeniable thing of curiosity, that you're like the way you describe that, like underlying all that is this natural, probably actually hard worked curiosity, where probably at times, and I noticed you mentioned, I've got this, informal group of CEOs that you call upon for perspectives. And I know a lot of chiefs that do that. Before they make a call, they'll make a call, right? And I know I'm actually one guy that occasionally gets a call from a few of them. And I know I'm not the only one they've called. I can tell by the way they're talking. I've already spoken to 2 or 3 people, but they're triangulating, getting some different thoughts, some different angles from very different kind of people, like a tech CEO. Or, they're going to be thinking differently. And I just wonder how many people have that they actually tap. I don't think it would be many.
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's not many, but the most successful people I know, at least inside of our organisation, have it in absolute spades. Look, you don't need to be sat down and shown how to do something. You find your way through it. You find ways to learn. You pick up the phone. You make that phone call. I mean, I've never had anyone outside of that very initial lesson that I got from Steve-O explain to me how P&L works. I've never had anyone sit down and talk me through a balance sheet or a cash flow, but you kind of get it. You're like, okay, I'm going to work this out. I'm going to go and talk to people and find your way through it. And that genuine curiosity is how you can get so much personal growth through having that. It's super important.
Do you know, I think one of the superpowers of curiosity is that curiosity kills ego.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you have that in an executive team, I think they're going to go a hell of a long way.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I've watched all sorts of egos over the journey, and I think, it's 100% something you've got to really keep in check and stay on top of. And I think you have nailed it. I think, that ability to say, hey, I don't understand this, so I don't know this, and go and find your way through it and seek a perspective. It does. It chops the ego out. I can tell you now, amongst the key leaders in my business, there's no egos around here. You don't last terribly long if you've got one.
That's a superpower team then, right?
Well, it just doesn't fit the culture. It doesn't fit the culture of who we are. And you get found out pretty quick. You got to have a bit of ability and a bit of curiosity in behind you.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about, there's 2 things I really want to get to you, because you spoke about how in chapter 5, whatever it was, when you started working directly for the founder, he started to help you understand a bit about values, but also a bit about strategy, getting it down to 5 things. So what I'd like to do is, there's 2 kind of questions here. I'm going to talk about the culture a bit later, but you've now bolted on, or through acquisition, you've added the private equity capital come in, you've started adding a whole bunch of businesses in. This business now is growing rapidly in size, complexity, I'm imagining all sorts of different systems and people and processes and history. You are allowed into this melting pot of awesomeness, right? Yeah. So the second part of the context, so that's where you are, is that almost every organization that I'm coming across these days is under-prioritized, which means they're not prioritizing, they're doing everything. And it's causing an enormous amount of pain. Their core business is being eroded away, and they've been, the lights, the shiny bright lights of some other new thing over here like AI is distracting them from their core business. Mm-hmm. So I will get to a question.
Okay. It's all right.
How do you, as a CEO, get the team focused when there's all this noise of rapidly growing business into a really manageable set of 5 core initiatives? How do you tactically and then practically manage that?
Yeah, I think the first way you get there is you make a lot of mistakes doing exactly everything that you've just said there. you get it wrong plenty of times. But I think, if I'm to think specifically through the acquisitions, because this is the sort of hardest part of this, when you look at M&A, 70% of M&A fails globally, right? There's studies everywhere on it, and almost all of it comes down to the human element. And if I think back to those first couple that we did and the way in which we approached it, we did stray away from our core, right? We tried to be too almost accommodating and too flexible around what the business is and who we are, to try and accommodate the new ones coming in with all the best will in the world, the right intent. And we just didn't execute those as well as what we should have. And, I've got a couple of regrets around a few people that we might have burnt along the way in doing that. But I think what we ended up coming down to is saying, right, we are not going to stray from where it is that we are heading. We are not going to stray from the 5 things that we're trying to achieve, and we're not going to stray from the 5 values that we have inside of this business. And over 20 years, we built a platform, right? We've run the largest business in this sector. We know what we're doing, and you need to be a little sort of uncompromising. It's a bit uncomfortable when you do it, but you need to be a bit uncompromising about that, because you can lose focus like that, and you can destroy the culture of a business literally in days. It's taken you years and years to build. And I think what we do now is this sort of, again, this idea of a bit of a SWAT team around our integrations. None of my executive team and none of my general managers are involved in any of the M&A, right? I've got external advisors and I deal with it. They're not going in all the way through, getting involved in diligence on them and all of that. I've got an advisor set that we work it out, and people will find out that we're buying a business literally about 2 weeks before we complete. Yeah, right. We'll go, that lunatic Marsonet bought another one. And then it's just all about execution and following the plan that we've worked out that works, to bring them in and integrate them, sort of 60, 90 days. You've got to move quick, But we learn that from making mistakes in the early part. So
the piece that you call this SWAT team, I wouldn't mind chatting a bit more about this. We've mentioned a couple of times now. One of the key principles you're talking about there is that they're not operational. They don't run the business every single day. There's a lot of organisations who are asking their executives to do both. Look at organisations, do the DD, plus what do you do at the point of integration? Right. So when there's integration happens, is that then the handover to the ops team, or does the SWAT team stay involved?
No, that's exactly what happens. We'll hand it over to, we'll start to bring the executive team probably, once we're getting close, generally around the time of which we're about to sign, and start saying, right, this is what we're buying, and this is how I think we should integrate it and how we've worked it out and all the rest of it. You start to word them up, and then, the team will start to then come together, and you hand it over and they operationalize the delivery. I think initially I was probably trying to do a bit of both as well. I was trying to be very involved in sort of buying them and, working with the founders of these businesses, which is a whole podcast in and of itself. And then and then trying to be heavily involved in the integration. I worked out I can't do both. So you just need to really trust this team of people to operationalize what it is that we've acquired and bring them in, and know that our kind of North Star that we've got and the values of the business and everything that we're trying to espouse is going to bring those sort of cultures together. So, and we've had the last couple that we've done have been super successful in that regard, particularly when you look back to the first 1 or 2 when we'd never bought a business, I had no idea what we were doing, right? So it's very impressive to watch. So they've literally, the team of, we bought a business at the end of August, one at the end of September, and then bought 2 in October. And I think they're going live on the systems over the weekend, right? Like it's pretty impressive the way the guys are around at these status. Yeah.
That's remarkable. Huh? So you speak about, in some ways, is wanting to protect the Altus culture, and before you're sort of like saying, well, we do need to be uncompromising about the way we bring things in. How do you? So first question is, what were you trying to protect in particular?
In particular, the values, like I talk a lot about values, right? And people talk.
Let's wax lyrical in
organisations. Like people talk a lot about values-led organisations and all of this. Altus is genuinely one of those, right? And these are authenticity, like accountability and teamwork and things like that. They're like GSD is one of our values, right? They bring a bit of energy, and this is how you can use them to tell stories about where it is we've come from. Like you can just pick the 5 values, you can tell the whole story of Altus through them, right? And it helps you give a way to communicate to people what we're all about, the type of people that we are, give them a story that they can believe in, and then it's all about action from thereafter, right? These people will forget what you said, but judge you on your actions very, very quickly. So one of the first things we do when we acquire a business, we tell them the story, we take them through the strategy, we talk about who we are. And it's a people business, right? Like almost my entire team of people that have come up through the organisation. It's it's an amazing industry where you can employ people from any background, no matter where they've come from, or, no one grows up in life wanting to work in traffic control. We find ourselves here for one reason or another. And it's a business that time and time again over its history has changed people's lives through employment and through opportunity. And I think when you've got powerful stories like that to be able to tell, and literally hundreds of examples, let alone, the fact that I'm a traffic controller sitting doing this, it does, this type of thing helps protect and bring people into what the organisation is really genuinely all about. But if I see anything sort of coming our way that's going to damage that or have us move away from that, I'd fight back pretty hard against it. And it was probably one of my great concerns as we started to bring in a private equity investor. It does shift perspectives, and you can run the risk of, the whole joint being overtaken by the cash flow or whatever it is. But you've got to always remember, fundamentally, it's a people business, and you've got to have that at the forefront of everything you do.
And you've said your private equity backers have been great.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, private equity has a pretty average reputation, and a lot of circumstances very, very well earned. But yeah, I think, we work with Pacific Equity Partners. I think Matt and the team that we have there, they've, if you talk about words versus actions, they've followed through with action. They're genuinely an organisation. This is our strategy. This is our business's strategy, not theirs. They're helping support us and enable us to do what we want to do, and get the support around myself and my management team to be able to move at the most incredible pace. Right? Golf's a 1 hour game inside of this business. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, would it be good to talk a bit more about these values? Like, one of the things that I've seen when values work really well is something that we certainly focus a lot with clients is the natural language. One of our lines that we talk about is the language of a team is a window to its soul. So if it's just words in a wall that look like integrity, like, all that's good and well, but no one really ever walks around and use that word. That's like the kind of words they use. Like, I think it's Atlassian has one of theirs is "don't fuck the customer." Like, one of ours internally, we're only a very small team, but like ours is just sparkle dust, right? But what the fuck does that mean? Well, it means that at the end of every engagement, we just try and sprinkle a bit of sparkle dust so that our clients feel loved and valued. Right. Yeah. Now, we could say a whole bunch of things, but that's what internally we're like, okay, well, it's the kind of language we actually use, right? So the natural language, and I love, you talk about story a lot. I think a lot of organizations have lost the ability when they tell story, but I don't think they understand the power. Like, story is the most powerful culture builder. Ritual, tradition, story, symbolism, how we talk about our heroes, how we talk about our enemies. These are powerful things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. If you come back to your first point around the language, around your values, like, one of the values this business has had forever is safety. Right? It's a high-risk environment, right? And we took that and you shift the language to make it protect the protectors, right? Because that's what we do.
Yeah. Protect your That's it.
You know what I mean? Like, it gives it a bit of power and all of that. We talk, I think one of the values was uplifting or something, and we changed it to make an impact, right? Like, make an impact on people, on customers, communities, whatever it is, So I think you bang on with the language, and GSD obviously gets them all up and about. And I just think that's super important. And then as you were talking about stories and how powerful they be, I literally got goosebumps, right? Because this is at the core of how you actually do this. If people want to know how you actually build a culture and use through this, it's
through stories.
It's telling the story of the union traffic controller in Hobart that now is the general manager of Tasmania, and his story, his journey, how he's come through the business. Yeah, the story of the traffic controller that runs into a burning building and pulls a lady out on his way home from work. I mean, these are the stories that you tell of the amazing things that people do inside of the business that make you sit back and go, you know what? This is pretty cool, Yeah.
And one of I also think it's from a bonding and a trust perspective. If you really want to connect with someone, you need to know each other's story, just of your life. I've been doing these exec workshops for years now, and then about 4 years ago, I started using this thing called Desert Island Discs. And it's from the UK radio show that's been going for nearly 100 years or something now. But what the radio show is, you come on the show, you're about to go to a desert island for the rest of your life, get to pick, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 songs. What songs are you going to pick? They're the only songs you ever get to listen to for the rest of your life. So we do this as an executive team. We sit around a campfire, grab a beer, a glass of wine, and we get the playlist. And I'll say, Ben, you're about to go to a desert island for the rest of your life. What are the 3 songs you're going to take and why? And then we'll talk through the 3 songs and then we'll listen to them. And everybody does it. And what I have never come across to this day, a better bonding experience in such a short period of time, because you just get to someone. So music has that ability to reach into someone's little soul, and they go back as you watch them regress to these incredible moments in their history, right? And they come to life in ways that you would never have seen in a corporate context. Right.
Yeah,
special.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we did a session, it was probably September last year, had about 150 of our team together.
Wow.
And we used an organisation we work with called the Reach Foundation, and they came in and had this beautiful way of being able to pick people randomly out that you know, voices that you would probably never hear from in the organisation, get them up on a stage and just ask them a few questions, and you start to really understand who these people are and where they came from. And it's super powerful. And we're big on sort of connectivity inside of the business too. Like this office that I sit in is probably the most useless piece of real estate in the whole of Sydney. You spend most of your time out amongst it, or I'm outside walking around on the phone talking to people, and these conversations start almost always asking people how they are and how their families are and stuff outside of work. And then you kind of get into that. And, you know, vulnerability is a big thing that we kind of push inside of the organisation. You've got to lead that. You've got to tell your own stories and acknowledge your own mistakes.
Exactly.
Crap. And I think that there is really how you start to get this culture of kindness and care and all the stuff that we love about the joint.
And I think that one of the things that's really important that I think a lot of chiefs almost fail to do is to tell their true story, right? Because if you, like, you know, the whole "Are you okay" day concept, I'm 100% back with support of it. But I think part of things would be, start by asking, "Are you okay?" Share how you are, right, and what's going on in your life, because that will create a bit of a space and a sense of reciprocity that it's okay to tell me what's going on with you, because I'm just a normal person as well. Like,
you have to, it has to be led by your senior people in the business, or it'll never become, if you want it as part of your culture, and I would employ you to do it. I think it's a very, very powerful thing. You have to lead it. You know, you have to talk about the times in your life when you really struggled, or when there was an awful, you know, whatever it is, you have to lead it and be very open about it. And once you do it, you know, they do see that you're a normal dude and happy to share, and you build out a pretty strong culture from there, you know.
I want to talk a bit about visible leadership. We're sort of already on this topic now, right? We're walking around on phone calls, being out the office is wasted real estate. You're always out there. Is there anything else that you find really important about visible leadership that maybe we haven't covered so far?
I think particularly in like what we're in a big services business, you know, compare it to, you know, sort of cleaning or facilities management or trade services or something like that. You know, I think I look at my role as 80 to 90% of my job is to engage the business. That is my job. The rest of it, you know, will come from wherever. And, you know, the reality of what that looks like is that you're going to places that you wouldn't ordinarily go, and you're speaking to people that you wouldn't ordinarily speak to. You know, you're going out to some rural site, you know, you're going out to the Carmichael rail mine in the middle of Queensland, nowhere, or you're getting dragged to the middle of some place I can't even pronounce in New Zealand, and you're standing on the side of the road with traffic controllers, team leaders, real people. These are the real people that build economies and build countries, right? And you're just standing out there, and I'm not there with a survey asking them to rate Altus out of 5 or anything like that. I'm there talking to them, getting them to share their stories with me. Like, how did you come to work here? You know, what's your background, family life, all of that. And you're creating this sort of connectivity where people start to see that you are just a real normal person. And we encourage all of our leaders to do this across the business. Like it's a KPI in the business. You have to go out on the road for half a day and be in and amongst your business. And you don't go to the guy that you know, have known for 10 years who works for us or whatever. You go someone that you've never met and go and spend time with them, and you help to show people that, you know, we are just normal people, and we do genuinely appreciate the work that the TCs do. None of us are here without them, right? You've got to go and let them be heard, show them appreciation, and recognise the good stuff that they do. You know, I think a big part of visible leadership is separating this idea of reward and recognition. I think everyone puts them together all the time, and to me, they are two vastly different, vastly separate things. And I think recognition is a huge part of being a strong and visible leader, and we push that a lot inside of the joint, you know.
Can you just tell me the nuance on how you separate? I agree with you, they're separate, but how do you view it in more depth?
To me, I think you get a lot of power out of recognising people, particularly in an organisation like ours that's so big. Like I will ring 10 to 15 traffic controllers in a month, right? To ring them up, I'll get word in that they've done something good somewhere, whatever it is, right? It could just be they've serviced the customer really well. It could be that they've, you know, saved someone's life in some instances, right? And I pick the phone up and I ring them and I personally thank them for whatever it is that they've done. I send people like little handwritten cards, shirts, recognising that when the behaviour is there that you want to see, it means a lot to people, right? And that's where you do start to build something special. And then rewards will come to those who get recognised, right? But start with recognition, because it, particularly for a workforce like ours, I think, and my experience is, it means an awful lot to them. And again, it's just showing that you are humane and authentic and genuinely loves what it is that these guys and girls do for you, you know. But that recognition part and just being able to find the good behaviours and call them out, I think is super, super important for any level. Yeah. And be disciplined around it, right? You have to be disciplined around it. Make the time to do it.
How do you guys debrief that as an exec team?
We'll share not so much debrief it. It's kind of not really the way that we sort of run and operate the business, but we share but we definitely share the experiences and share the stories that we're getting from wherever it is. And then what you love to see is when that next layer down, your general managers and your ops managers and people at that level are starting to do it in their own sort of teams, in their own meetings, and are going out of their way. And that's when you know you're starting to win the fight. Yeah.
Well, I did have a question about, you know, how do you bridge this gap between and stop the usness, then the blue collar be white collar thing. But I think what you're describing is essentially your superpower in destroying that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You got to be amongst them, and you got to show the phone calls. So like anyone in the organisation can ring me anytime. Like if the traffic controller rings me, I'll ring them back. If they've taken the time out of their day to phone call, I'll pick up the phone and talk to them and just palm it off to the HR manager or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
They probably don't agree with my answer to them or whatever, but my job is to give them an understanding as to things are as they are, and you know they can take that away and what they do with it. You know,
creates such a powerful folklore on the front line that I can just call the CEO and he does take my call. Like there's a thing about complaints, and I've seen this a lot in exec teams working together. If you're going into something where you're going to go away and you know someone's got an agenda item they want to have a say about. And what I found really interesting is once they've had their say, they'll often give the ground even. They just want someone to damn well listen while they get on a high horse and make their damn point, right? And it's the fact they're not being listened to, or at least told, I get your point, it is a good one, but sorry.
Go right back to chapter 1, Greg.
Exactly. Righto, Chiefs. More from Ben in a minute. Now, recently, I spoke to the legendary Jack DeLosa, founder and CEO of The Entourage. We spoke about frameworks for success, building customer connection, and raising capital from an investor's viewpoint. These are all critical skills for executives, Chief, and Jack absolutely nails them. Here's what Jack had to say about satisfying customer needs.
I think about how many layers, how many people, really intelligent, capable people And then I think, I wonder how many of them have called the customer service line. Because all it would take is one person with any level of decision-making influence to call that line. And again, this is their core value prop of having this card. And so that's what I mean. The disconnect between what goes on in the boardroom and what goes on at the front line is huge. And this is really important, Greg.
You can listen to that remarkable chat with Jack. Just go to chiefmaker.com/360.
And while you're there, you can subscribe to the podcast and check out all the other great interviews with our chiefs and gurus, as well as all the minisodes by going to chiefmaker.com/listen now.
All right, Chief, let's get back to Ben Marsonet of the Altus Group. When you're working with a leader up and coming in the business who is stalled, stuck in their career, not really going anywhere, what kind of questions or conversations do you have with them?
See, often, we obviously you see it happening, right? You see it happening, and what I'll try and do is I'll be a lot more deliberate with the cadence of contact with that individual. So, and try and lead them towards recognizing that if you do it right, I think what's important is that they recognize in of themselves that they've stalled. And so I'll generally put a bit of effort into a couple of conversations to try and help steer them to this realization that maybe they are a bit stalled, because really what we like to see inside of our organization is people ask for help and people ask for support. And if you do that, we'll put all the firepower in the world behind you, right? But often we try and get them to get to that realization in the first instance, get them to stick their hand up and then go and give them whatever they need. It doesn't always pan out like that, as you would imagine, and you've got to have sort of a more direct sort of conversation with them, and then you are saying, starting to give them advice and saying, we think you need to do this, or start to move in this direction, or whatever. And once you've given them that, it's on them to take that, do something with it. And if they don't, it's time. It's time.
Yeah, sure.
So I wouldn't say there's any sort of mass overarching structure to it, but sure. It's very much sort of understand where people are and trying to give them the opportunity to get to the realization. And if they don't realize it in and of themselves, then you're on a hiding to nothing. I think you make that decision quick and on you go.
Probably leads a little bit into men's mental health when we all get a bit stuck in life from time to time. Sometimes we don't get stuck, we can go down a goddamn horrible vortex and of terror. But what would you love to see more of in the men's health movement?
Look, I think it's come leaps and bounds in the last 5 years, I would say. I think the awareness around it, and I think you look at, there's some of the organisations in our sector, people like Mates in Construction and, the trademark guys out there with their colourful shirt. Like you're starting to see it become quite normalised. Yeah, it's starting to become very, very normalised across civil construction. I still think there is a decent way to go in terms of vulnerability and kindness amongst dudes, particularly in our sector. They're pretty, lots of hard heads, lots of guys have some pretty full on stories and backgrounds. But I think what I like to see more of is more people leading that vulnerable conversation. I try and do it as much as I possibly can, because that's where you break it all down through your own personal stories or whatever it is. But I think the last few years, I think has been a huge, huge leap forward. And I think, you're starting to focus more on the preventative side of mental health and starting to try and have these conversations early. Most of the money is trying to go in to fix the problem once it's gone too far. I think you're starting to see a really nice shift into more preventative side of it. And I think, the more and more we can shift that way, the better that the whole society will be.
Has there been any personal development tools, or it might even be a podcast or a book, or could even be something on YouTube that you've ever listened to that you go, that's really accessible, easy for me or any man or woman to get their head into this game of good personal growth?
Look, I think from a mental health side, there's a couple of people that I do really enjoy listening to their story. One of them is a chap by the name of, probably not many people know him, is a guy by the name of Sean Weir, who founded an organisation called the Shaka Project. And, it was like a clothing brand that he started after he's had all sorts of battles in his life. He's a super open, vulnerable, like legend of a human being. But he started this kind of clothing brand, and I think you followed some of his stuff and you look at some of what he says and all the rest of it. I think he's a very, very powerful communicator with a very, very powerful story. And I think, guys like him, we wheel in out to toolboxes and stuff all around our business to try and, sort of promote the conversation and get people thinking. We've got trucks wrapped up in the Shaka project. Everyone gets a shirt when they start for us and all of that type of stuff. But he's just a dude he's just a normal guy from Ballarat, right? That's kind of found his way to this, and that was a pretty solid story, and has lots of good insights into how you can, sort of positive behaviours that can help keep your mind in check. So he's a dude I do love listening to. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Ben, we're coming a little bit towards the end here, mate.
Sure.
We've got some rapid fire kind of questions to finish off.
Okay.
You ready to go?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, let's go from the top. Rapid fire question, Ben. If you could form the ultimate executive team, any well-known leader from any time in history, who would your first three picks be and why?
I'd have Elon Musk as my COO. You want to talk about a man that can execute and make some, he'd be right up at the top of my list. I've had Richard Branson as my chief people officer. I love the culture that he's built inside of some of his businesses. And I don't quite know what I would do with her, but I'd love to have Martha Stewart. You talk about a woman who's been through plenty, and she's nimble, very adaptable. I'd find a seat in a bus for Martha.
Wow, she's never been nominated in this special group before, but I think
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I don't know how the three of them would get on too well, but have to do a bit of ego work.
We have to do a bit of story work and ego work, but be a little bit fun, I think. Yeah. What's the best advice a mentor has ever given you?
Be yourself and be authentic.
Yeah, nice. What is your number one interview question when looking for senior executives to join your team?
I ask them what's important to them, and the answer that comes will determine whether they're going to fit the culture or not. The number one thing I look for is cultural fit, and if you ask them what's important to them, you get there pretty quick.
Sweet. Can you nominate another CEO with great respect we should bring on the podcast?
I'm going to put my mates. I reckon Robbie Sharon-Zipser, who is the CEO and founder of High Pages. Dude, brilliant story, and has been through, built a tech platform. It's an incredible story. Super clear on strategy, great thinker. Yeah.
That sounds great. Let's see if we can lure him on the show. Yeah. Like similar.
I reckon we'll be. Yeah, we'll normally go to the opening of a garage door, so I reckon he'll be there.
I feel terrible if I get him now. If you could lead any company in the world, any organization, anywhere on the planet, what would you lead?
It's hard to get away from Altus, but it would have to be, it would be something like Linfox, capital deployments, and you still get the humbling nature of dealing with truck drivers and so, or an airline, maybe Virgin, where you can get a bit of ground crew in there and big capital deployment thing,
that'd be interesting.
Something like that.
Okay, mate, what is a final message of wisdom and hope?
My final message of wisdom and hope, I would just say people are amazing. Human beings are incredible, and I think there is so much potential in places where you never thought that you would find it, and I encourage people to go deep, get to understand the people inside of your business and around you. I think you can build something pretty special if you get to that. The human species is bloody amazing.
What a great way to finish, Ben, mate. Thank you for everything you're doing in the world around us. You're really making a difference.
Thank you, Greg. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Chief, that sums it up for this week. And Ben Marsonet, CEO of the Altus Group. What a true chief, as I said in the intro. He is in real life as awesome as he is on the podcast. A true chief and wonderful, wonderful executive who is leading remarkable change in an industry that I think must just be loving his influence. Chief, all the links can be found at chiefmaker.com/361.
And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources that you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.